I was thinking, last time we talked about Vachisankara and the intention behind speaking. And a while ago, Medini actually said that in regards to the Kaya Sankara, basically, that there is this, when one attends the breath and the intention behind it, there is this discrepancy between the intention to do so and the body breathing. And so should something similar be sought in regards to speech?
Yeah, recognized.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I was saying last time. Like, you can think and ponder, but then the body will be speaking for you. But it's the assumption through non-clarified extent of thinking and pondering. The assumption is that your thoughts spill through your mouth. It's the same thing. It's the same direction, but it's not. Outlining that, the clearer it is, the less able you would be to assume that body that speaks on your behalf, that creature, as the suttas would refer to. Like, it can't even be seen as mine anymore. You're just there doing these things, having thought and pondered, speaks like this, does like this. But in order to see it's a discrepancy from the point of view of assumed directionality of ownership. But if that discrepancy is cultivated sufficiently enough, you realize, oh no, the ownership was the discrepant part. These are just heaps next to each other, as they always have been. The body, the mind, superimposed feelings, is just there in their own domains.
It's like in that sutta where he says, oh, I've been so cheated by this mind. I've been assuming just form, just feeling.
Yeah, it was just this, and it was just this, and it was just this. But in order to see those domains, the aggregates existing on their own, it's not just a view you can adopt on top of things. You have to have been withdrawn from sensuality thoroughly, seeing the peril in it, because any notion of sensual pleasure requires that overlap, that directionality, that discrepancy to be assumed. So for as long as internally the mind is not turned away from the value of pleasures through the senses, you're not going to see the separate domains, because you're still connecting them, so to speak. That's why even for like the outlining of that thinking and pondering, the verbal thoughts, you need to be secluded and you need to be away from other people speaking, because the external speech that you're hearing is already kind of fueling that assumption of directionality that your thoughts spill them out. So you wouldn't be able to outline it if you're in a chatter of other people, because your thoughts are already on the level of that external chatter. So you need to be physically withdrawn from it, dwell in silence in that sense, so that you can hear your own thoughts speaking correctly, independent of the non-speaking mouth, and then cultivate the discernment of that.
Sorry, are you talking about realizing that the thoughts are not you? Or?
No. It's about discerning the difference between the thoughts, thinking and pondering, the extent of the images, verbal thoughts, verbalizations, and the actual physical speech.
So basically, for me it seems obvious to see that verbalization is one thing, internal verbalization, and like actual speaking is a different thing. So, but what is?
Yeah, well, it is obvious, but the thing is, like, verbalization internally is taking up your body externally. That is not obvious to people. If it were, they would be free from sensuality. You are taking up your mouth through your thoughts. You are placing your mind in your head, your point of view behind your eyes. All these overlaps are gratuitous. And if you look behind your eyes, you won't find your mind. If you dissect the mouth, you won't find your verbal thinking there either. Yet it's kind of there. And it's a way of gratuitous taking up of a domain that cannot be taken up.
So it's on the level of the possibility of speech, and that is seen as the possibility to step outside of thinking and pondering. That's the assumption that people are unable to.
Yeah. But what is the? Let's approach it differently. What's the practical benefit of that?
of seeing the assumption,
seeing the extent of your thinking and pondering, seeing the extent of your mind talking and differentiating from body breaking into speech. What's the practical benefit of that type of composure?
Responsibility, in the sense of seeing I mean, you find yourself in this ignorance, this assumption. So you find oneself already assuming the possibility of speech being outside.
Yeah. Okay. So those assumptions.
Yeah.
Are they a result of I don't know, some secrets and mistakes and hidden information that you haven't figured out? Or are they a result of certain states of mind that you're still cultivating and engaging with and acting out of?
Yeah, the latter.
The latter, exactly. Yeah. So then, should this practice of discerning the extent of your thinking and pondering in silence, in solitude, should that be about figuring out where these assumptions are and undoing them? Or should that be about not perpetuating those mental states?
Exactly, yeah.
So how do you then not perpetuate those mental states through the practice of discerning the extent of your thinking and pondering?
By seeing how one is not currently discerning the extent of one's thinking and pondering.
Yeah, that's the overall goal. That's the problem. But is that your mental state?
In the current
So in your
action,
action, is your mental state
mentally? Yes, it is. Yeah.
Which one?
If one, so mentally, I am acting out of this assumption that.
Well, you can't help that though.
Hmm.
So if you say, okay, I shall not act out of this assumption, that's rooted in assumption. But what I'm pointing at is what we discussed last time is the fuel for that assumption.
Hmm.
It's not your assumption that still hasn't figured out where the line is.
Is the action.
Well, it's the desire and lust.
Yeah.
Yeah. That then obviously you act out of.
Hmm.
And that starts with the mental state.
Hmm.
So then your thinking and pondering, you will be acting. I mean, the whole skillful thought versus the unskillful thought, maintaining the skillful context, it's all form of acting. But it's acting that's sort of paired with that yonisamanasikara. You're not acting out of trying to get rid of this.
No, exactly.
You are acting in order to remove the fuel for the mind that feeds these assumptions.
Yeah.
So how do you do that? That's what I'm asking basically. Practically then, how do you use your verbal thinking? How do you use discerning the extent of thinking and pondering to stop providing fuel.
I mean,
What's the practice?
It is kind of like an activity in itself to see the non-activity, to kind of to see.
But practically,
So you're thinking to yourself. I mean, you're establishing the correct order through thinking and pondering.
So okay, we're back then onto it. So is the problem because there is no correct order? Is that how the problem is being fueled? Like, let's say, can you appropriate? Can you really own the 5 aggregates?
No.
So,
yeah, exactly.
even if you want to or not,
Mm.
you can't really do much about it.
Yeah.
Yet, you keep forgetting,
Mm.
and you keep getting lost in the notion that you are the owner.
Mm.
What fuels that notion? Since you cannot really pervert the order of the aggregates,
Mm.
yet the assumption of perversion is there. Why? What fuels it? It's not knowing, because you know now that order cannot be perverted, yet you're still doing it. Every now and then. Why?
No, you're doing it all the time. No, I mean,
Well, are you doing it all the time?
well, yeah. Every now and then, it sounds as if like
No, every now and then you add the fuel.
right.
Sure, you might have your notions all the time,
Mm.
but every now and then you add the fuel.
Mm.
But not knowing how you're adding the fuel, that's how you will keep adding the fuel.
Yeah.
So how do you add the fuel to the wrong notions of ownership, self, and everything else?
By acting out of craving, lust, aversion.
Last of it. So surely those shouldn't be the criteria you want to be using. Not these kind of borderline abstract notions of, yes, as I said, you need to get the information. But if you keep revolving around information of what comes first and what comes second, you are just revolving around the ideas. While in practice, you are still inadvertently fueling the fire.
Yeah.
So,
for sure.
Let me ask it even more bluntly. What are the 5 ways you could be fueling the fire of assumption? There's only 5 ways. What are they? What are the 5 ways?
5 hindrances.
What are they? Start. We do them all.
Okay, so sensuality,
Sensuality,
then there's ill will,
ill will,
then there's the dullness, drowsiness, sloth, torpor kind of thing.
Yeah.
Restlessness, remorse, anxiety.
Yeah.
And doubt.
and doubt. Exactly. So those are not the abstract things. Those are states of mind or mind affected with them. The extent of your thinking and pondering in silence, away from other people speaking and noises in that sense, that's what you aim for. Okay, what is my current state of mind? Is there sensuality present? Can there sensuality arise if it's not arisen? And you can have your mind talking about it to yourself. You don't need to verbalize it physically, but because mental verbalization, thinking and pondering to its full extent, is done presently in regard to presently enduring states. And see, that's like the whole tendency to clarify what the right view is, what comes first, what the right order is, what the right assumption is. Yeah, that's what brought you here. But the point will come when you start to recognize, now, that is one of the hindrances. I'm acting out of pressure to get rid of this non-clarity that I have clarified thousands of times before. I spoke and thought about it and clarified it, and then I forgot about it, and then I clarified it again after I thought about it. So you realize, okay, so how about now I don't emphasize what I should be thinking the right view is. I start emphasizing not having the 5 hindrances present here and now for this duration of time. And the only way to not have 5 hindrances present is to fully clarify them. They won't happen magically like, phew, now I'm in a state, hindrances will disappear. No, they will disappear when you have fully understood, discerned, endured. Okay, so is there sensuality present? Yes, there is. Okay, so then continue your self-internal, verbalized, non-speaking questioning. Is this for my harm? What does this result into? Is this pressure towards sense pleasure? Is it pleasant or unpleasant, really? Is it annoying or peaceful? Which one is it? And practice that type of... See, you're now establishing a different context in regard to the presence of a mind affected with sensuality. Because the usual context is mind affected with sensuality. Context is get rid of this, get more pleasure in the
Content.
Yeah, context is go for the content.
Hmm.
Well, now context is going for the content is never a good idea. It was always resulted in my harm of others, loss of perspective, and everything else, the swamp of everything else that follows. What do I do now? Nothing. Now think more about the same swamp, the same context, the same peril, and then you will see, oh look, mind is now free from that same sensual desire that was here before. Is the real will present? I don't know. Well, bring up something that used to annoy you, that annoyed you yesterday, that annoyed you 10 years ago, that filled you with ill will or anger. Have the mind of anger present. Okay, so is this for my benefit? Is this really beneficial? Like, is this really what I want? Even when I'm angry and when I act out of anger, is this the outcome I want? No. I want this to not be here in the first place. So, when does it become a problem?
When you act out of it.
Yeah. So I've been making it a problem by trying to get rid of it or acting out of it or taking it for granted. Reflect on that new context, and the ill will subside in the face of that which you hate. Let's put it that way. Same then with drowsiness. Is there lack of energy? Is there sleepiness? Is there laziness? Is there unwillingness to make the effort? Then again, reflect, question, verbalize the context in regard to that. So, how much time do I have left? I don't know. So, really, is it going to be end of the world if I don't go to sleep immediately, or if I go and do this or do that, or if I just sit and continue verbalizing these things and thinking about them correctly? And then the energy will come back. And then same goes for worry. Is there anything that would worry me? Okay, well, see, that's a problem. If I'm still subjected to worry, it means I'm not dispassionate towards the world, towards the senses. Why am I not dispassionate towards the world, towards the senses? Why am I still subjected to worry? Can it be just, accidentally, not my own doing? Or am I still doing things in regard to the world that are based on a certain degree of concern, entertainment, distraction? Either way, to some extent, I'm still using the world and the content it provides, maybe not the sensual and kind of hateful aspects, but other ways, am I still engaging with the world for the sake of forgetting about myself? Oh, well, that's why I'm still subjected to worry. And then doubt, the last one. So, is the doubt present in his mind? No. Can it? Well, let's see. Do I doubt that all of this practice I've been doing now in regard to the 4 hindrances, is that right or wrong? No, I'm pretty clear that it's right. And if anything's to be right, it's closer to... Okay, so to this extent, at least, I'm free from doubt. So to this extent, at least, now, I am free from the 5 hindrances. So what is the context of that? There is a state of mind. There is a degree of pressure. There is thinking of pondering. But there is also seclusion from unwholesome states. There is also a certain degree of imperturbability. There is feeling. There is perception. There are obviously intentions. Oh, look, I described the factors of the first jhana. Which, yes, it says, once you have been thoroughly withdrawn from hindrances, the pleasure will be born from that seclusion. But you won't be withdrawn from it magically. You won't be withdrawn from it on account of meditation experience. You'll be withdrawn on account of diligence, that we said so many times before. So it's not even a hard work in a way. Just, keep the precepts, don't engage with sensuality, restrain your speech. And when you're secluded, what do I do? Okay, well, there you go. What do I do? Well, let me see if the mind is free from sensuality, free from ill will, and rinse and repeat.
And then you fall off, and you find yourself...
How'd you fall off? Can you fall off accidentally? Can you just trip over and, oh, look, I'm back into sensuality and ill will and so on? Can that happen?
Well, I suppose by not becoming established.
You're not established. You couldn't get established. You got distracted, whatever else. That still doesn't mean you fell off.
Mm-hmm.
How'd you fall off? Can you fall off accidentally?
By acting out.
By acting out.
Yeah.
So it cannot happen by accident. So even if you don't make any effort, as long as you don't make the effort to fall off, you won't fall off either. That's the point.
So you can forget but not fall off. As
Exactly.
long as
Yeah, you
don't
can
act
forget.
out.
You cannot be diligent enough,
Hmm.
and you know, like you can be careless in that regard, but you're still not falling off for as long as you don't start going back to sensuality, the content, the distraction of the world, and so on.
Hmm.
And those things cannot be done accidentally.
Hmm.
They're always on the level of choice.
Hmm.
And that's the whole point of this, as I said, discerning the extent of thinking and pondering, the extent of that vachisankara, the verbal thinking. There's no problem with it at all. Quite the opposite. It's actually quite a palpable anchor that you can use to discern and sustain wholesome states of mind, free from hindrances. That's the point of the practice. It's not magically just talking, repeating words to yourself because that's how you enter samadhi or something, through a mantra or through, as I said before, like saying what you're doing while you're doing it. And no. I mean, if you do any of that, it would be for the sake of revealing the state of mind, clarifying it if it's not clear. No, let me stop and think about this. And let me verbalize those thoughts so I don't get sort of distracted by my own thinking. And yeah, for that, you can't have people talking around you. And the clearer this becomes, then when you do speak, engaging in speech or physical actions will not, because they've been purified beforehand, as that Majjhima Nikaya Sutta says, then when you do engage, it will not be reintroducing that gratuitous overlap that you know it cannot happen. But one thing is to know it, another thing is to actually develop your mind in regard to it. And that's also just brings me back to another point I want to highlight. So, as we said, like, so you cannot accidentally fall back. It's just impossible. So then, universally speaking, when people do fall back, regardless of the views, regardless of the meditation practices and techniques and what they think meditation is or what meditation should achieve, that is the reason why they fall back. It's not because they haven't done their vipassana retreat long enough, or it's haven't because, you know, the mantra was not powerful enough. No, it's because they went and acted towards sensuality. There is no other cause for falling off. Even if you spend the rest of your life with completely muddled, ridiculous, mystical views, yeah, you might not be getting to the goal of the Buddhist practice, but you're not falling off for as long as you're not going back to sensuality. As simple as that. And when people fall off because they chose to act against the precepts, against sense restraint, and while it's right there in the face, the reason for their falling off, they don't see it. They think, oh, it's because I have not been on a long enough retreat. So next time, and then next time they commit even harder. They make even more effort into the area that makes no difference. They go and spend 3 months in a cell. Somebody brings them food and all they watch is their sensations and so on. And that makes no difference. That was not the reason for their falling off. And it will be not their reason for being picked up. And they might pick up the practice there again, not because of their meditation technique, but because they're withdrawn from sensuality. But they don't see that as the core factor. They think that's all secondary, which is why when they go against it, they also think, oh, that's secondary, it doesn't matter as much. Which is why they go against it. Which is why they take precepts conditionally. And even if somebody is practicing for the sake of deities and whatnot, again, they will fall off from whatever the practice is, or they will not fall off from whatever the practice is if they act towards sensuality or not.
Or ill will. Or
hindrances and so on.
Yeah.
But predominantly sensuality, really. Lack of sense restraint and falling back onto gratification of your senses. That's it. That's what Buddha did say in that another sutta. Even if a monk does not develop any distinction at all, remains with confused mindfulness, no right view, but he keeps the precepts, and even for the rest of his life he's just in tears and pain of restraint, but he still remains keeping the precepts, he's heading up, not down, so to speak. And that's important to emphasize, see, because you could still, I've fallen off because I haven't discerned the principle with this is sufficiently enough. No. You might not have discerned the principle sufficiently enough, so they might not be the results of that discernment, but you haven't fallen off. You've fallen off if, having not discerned the principle with this is sufficiently enough, then you went and acted towards sensuality. That's why you fell off. And that's not something you can just, how did this happen? Because it's always on the level of conscious choice.
If I might just slightly backtrack to what you were talking about before in regards to actively questioning oneself in regard to the sensual thought that has arisen or could arise, for example. I mean, you were saying it already, but I thought it might be good to highlight the point that in this sutta that you've been mentioning a lot, the two types of thought. When it starts by saying, okay, sensual thought has arisen in me, now I see, okay, this is for my dangers, for my harm of others, harm of both, etc. And then it continues, a non-sensual thought arose in me, or a thought of renunciation. It's kind of natural, I guess, to think as there's a sensual thought, and then there's a non-sensual thought that's a different thing. Or it's a different type of object, for example, or I'd have to think but it's not quite that, as in it's exactly the type of thinking of seeing the problem or the danger of the sensual thought that has arisen that constitutes
that's the non-sensual thought.
Thought.
They're not linearly out
exactly.
there, you can pick and choose between the two.
Exactly.
No, it's on the level of the state of mind. That's even if for you to discern the sensual thought correctly, first you got to see your mind, whether it's affected by it or not. Because what you think sensual thoughts are, to start with, that's already the result of your sensual thoughts. So first, physical seclusion, precepts, physical seclusion, guarding of the sense doors. As we said before, losing or overcoming the concern and joys in regard to the entire world to any extent, to every extent. So then, your own thinking and pondering, the domain, the speech, the creature there can be outlined because it's not being interfered with. And then you get to see what state of mind endures in regard to it, whether it's leaning towards it or leaning away from it, whether it's inclining towards pleasure or not, and that's how you start then cultivating it. First you have to take that elephant out of that wilderness of its own sensuality. But for as long as there is a thread remaining, a possibility for an elephant to still kind of re-engage every now and then, and you don't keep an eye on that, well, to that extent it's going to remain wild. To that extent it will not accept your verbal thinking and directing into the right context. It will only take it conditionally. And that's also the difference. See, once the mind is now purified from the hindrances, with the sustained diligence effort, whenever you're alone, you ponder, you clarify, you let it endure. If it's not sensual, okay. What is the context of a non-sensual mind? How does it feel, so to speak? How does it look? Okay, I'm now in the state of a non-sensual mind. Okay, let me remember that. Let me pick up the signs and features of that. So, having developed your mind like that, then all those things that you learned before, that you need to learn, such as with this is, and the right view, and all of that, then falls into place without you needing to force it there. You start recognizing it, because the things that were obscuring it have subsided. That's why even for the right view in the suttas, the mind is free from hindrances at that time. usually thanks to the Buddha in the suttas, but obviously sometimes people themselves made the effort. And that's why those things are not seen on the level they need to be seen, because there are obstructions there. But if, for as long as a person just keeps emphasizing seeing it, ignoring what's obstructing that very seeing they are so keen to do, they won't see it. They won't see it on that right level. And that's the element of faith here. Okay, but I want to understand it. And through that wanting of understanding, I have learned that there are things that are obstructing me to understand it. Thus, in order to understand it, let me then, out of faith, put this desire for understanding aside and actually understand these hindrances first and free my mind from them. Yeah, but what if, hindrance of doubt, right, okay, so now I shall understand that. Not by providing answers, but by contemplating, verbalizing the context in regard to the state of mind affected with doubt. Is this for my benefit? How many times in the past have I been affected by doubt? How many times in the past have I sought the answers? How many times in the past have I found the answers? Did this ever stop? No. Same like sensuality. How many times you seek the gratification, scratch the itch, just to find out now which is even more pressuring. Oh, well surely then this principle of doubt is the same. I engage in satisfying the content of the doubt, providing the answer, so to get rid of the pain of the doubt means I'm now more under the thumb of the pain. Next time it comes, I'll be even more pressured to act. And is that for my benefit? No. So I shall then, for as long as the mind of doubt is present, also I will have this context of danger, peril, harm present. So then the mind will turn away from the doubt, from wanting to act out of the doubt.
And like you were saying earlier, you can also like test the mind, like what if I never get the answer to this? Like, can I handle that situation?
Yeah.
Or like, what if?
Well, you need to be prepared to never get the answer.
Yeah, that's the point. Yeah, because getting the answer
it won't solve
rooted in the intention of getting rid of the pain means more pain.
Damn as well.
Yeah, so it will never be an answer.
And you can like do that with all the five hindrances. Just test yourself, like that thing that made me anxious or angry.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Can that make me anxious and angry now? Like, and
or can anything else do so? And if it is so, what do I do then? What do I do then?
Oh yeah, even more extreme.
So now there is mind affected with anxiety or fear. What do I do then? Well, there you go. That's the first question I ask myself. Why do I need to do anything? What's the pressure? What's the reason for me wanting to do something about this present state of mind? I'm not acting out of it. I did not create it. I did not invite it. Yet it's here. Why do I need to do anything about it? And if doing anything about it, would that constitute acting out of it? Would it make it worse? Oh yeah, it would. Every single time it did. So then I shall only remain contemplating the danger in doing something about it until the mind calms down. And then if I do something about it, it will be fine, because it won't be rooted in that pressure to do something about it, which is bothering me. And that's why what do I do? Why? Oh, because it's unpleasant. So I want to do something because I want to get rid of the pain. Is that for my benefit? How many times in the past I've experienced that? Trying to get rid of the pain through doing something. Accepting pain at the face value and acting out of it. And did that ever remove the liability to pain? Or did it just manage the current pressure and made me feel alright, but then made me more dependent on doing something about it? So that's what you do. You don't act and sustain the context in regard to it for as long as it's present. And the mind will have to turn away because it never wanted it in the first place.
John, to understand what you're saying, so you said that this verbalization is well, it's connected to the first jhana, basically. But should this happen only when you uprooted the hindrances, at least in the present situation, or is this engagement with with the hindrances, working with them, is already the first jhana. I presume it's not, because they're still present.
Yeah, I mean, technically, first jhana, pleasure of first jhana, it's after. The mind is now thoroughly abiding in that, neither too much nor too little. So you're not inclining towards the content of the hindrances, nor are you trying to get rid of it. So you have calmed down within it. But really, that pleasure of jhana would not have come if this engagement in the work has not been completed. And that's why I said in the previous, well, I don't know which one now, but one of the previous talks, the closest to a method for jhana, it's that, purifying your mind from the hindrances, because that's what every sutta that mentions gradual training, that's what it describes. So keep the precepts, gotta sense those, moderate in eating, watchfulness of your intentions, and then dwelling in seclusion, and then first watch of night, second watch of night, third watch of night, and all this diligence after Pindapat, before Pindapat. What he does is he purifies his mind from the 5 hindrances. And just day in, day out, that's his work, that's his diligence. And then, after that, his mind is now thoroughly secluded from those 5 bases. They would keep the mind engaged with unwholesome things. So now it's fully withdrawn from it, and then the pleasure born from that seclusion comes to be. So it's like, yeah, that's the jhana part, but you realize that pleasure is really just the result. That pleasure of safety is the result of the work of making yourself safe in regard to these 5 hindrances.
It's almost like
5 imperfections of mind, 5 weaknesses of wisdom, all these descriptions of it. That's the work, that's the method, that's the technique, but good luck doing it mechanically.
And thinking and pondering as the jhana factor, is it like, is whatever mind thinks about in this state without hindrances? Or what is it?
Well, yeah, if you made the effort thoroughly, and that might take a long time to overcome the 5 hindrances, to learn how to compose your mind away from them, from these 5 kind of sticky aspects, they would drag you back into sensuality, ill will, and so on. Then whatever the mind were to think, you won't think those 5 things. You won't think things within them. And that's what Bodhisattva realized himself. Oh wait, now having been withdrawn from the hindrances through maintaining the right context, he recognized, oh hold on, I haven't had those thoughts anymore. Why don't I just now let this mind roam around? I don't need to keep constantly policing it and sustaining it with the right context. And that's where he started calming down internally, even further. Because he said first he was just, the 2 types of thought, he was just thinking wholesome, establishing the context of wholesome thoughts in regard to the unwholesome hindrances. And then he said tireless energy arose in me, day in, day out. It was just uninterrupted energy. But that in and of itself, it's not as nice as a complete peace. It's still nicer than sensuality, tireless energy, effort, zeal, just effortless. When energy is tireless, it feels effortless. But it's not as peaceful. So then he recognized, okay, so why don't I stop this now? Because it was done for the purpose of overcoming the 5 hindrances. And now the mind is not even, like even when I let go of it, it's not going into the hindrances. So why don't I let go of it? And there was the simile of, like, first regathering your cow's herd from eating in other people's pastures, and then these crops that they used to be so inviting are now too distant, too far removed, taken away. So there is nothing enticing these cows. You can let them roam. You don't need to keep them tied down and hitting them with a stick and so on, because they're not wandering anywhere. And then you can even have a little snooze under the tree. You know they will not go anywhere, and then the confidence is born from that seclusion even further. But you know exactly how it came to be. It wasn't just magically, I just fell asleep and look, cows didn't go. Wow, that's amazing. No, you know why they didn't go. Because you prevented any reason for their going way beforehand and way thoroughly. So that's the work aspect.
So basically, then you're saying that in this Dvidaha Vitakka, so 2 kinds of thought sutta, when he was saying that well, I see that there is the thought of non-will, non-sensuality. At this point, he was already abiding in the first jhana. Well,
now, I mean, the outlining the moment or no. The point is, if you're withdrawn from the 5 hindrances, if your mind is on its own, without your input, without your context, not thinking sensuality, not going towards ill will, not going towards laziness, then that's all you need to be concerned about. Like, focus on that, really. Then when jhana starts, from what moment onwards, I wouldn't worry about that. That would be the result of this, which needs to be done. But see, if you worry where it starts, or if you still think it's important to know where exactly that pleasure of seclusion starts, means your seclusion will be conditional for that pleasure. But any pleasure that you want before you were secluded will be a sensual pleasure, will be underlined by craving, and thus it will not be the pleasure of seclusion. So you really need to stop emphasizing or just regard it as equally dangerous, because it would be the pleasure that you want, and the pleasure of jhana is not something you can want. It's not underlined by lust, craving, and that's why it's a wholesome pleasure. Because wanting pleasure, it's a hindrance. It's the first hindrance.
And people can, like, even it's not unusual in the world for people to restrain themselves, give up lots of things for the sake of a greater pleasure later on. Oh, let me, save things, not go to the bar, not go to what my usual pleasures, so that I can go on this great holiday and next
get
year.
A reward.
Delayed gratification.
Delayed gratification.
And that's
still within the hindrance. That's still meditating with the hindrances, as the Buddha said so many times.
So nobody would say that that way of acting, like restraining myself in such and such ways so that I can get a holiday later on, is not sensual. It's very obvious that it's sensual. Yeah. But it is kind of the same principle if somebody does these things for the sake of the pleasure of jhana. So,
and that's the criteria. That's the criteria. I think even like the later on student commentaries of the suttas, even they kind of figure that out through all the text, that if you want jhana, you need to stop wanting it. There can be no craving or desire for pleasure present, because that's still within the hindrance, and because of that, it won't be the jhana. So same, if you have a desire towards that jhana pleasure or pleasure meditation, there you go. Verbalize your thinking in regard to that for the next 2 weeks, until it's absolutely clear. Why do you want to do it? What do you expect from it? What's the problem with not having it? Where's the issue?
No, it seems to me that there is a difference between craving for jhana and desiring for jhana. It's probably the same as desiring enlightenment. So you cannot say that I don't care completely if I become enlightened or not. But
well, overall, sure, you want to be enlightened, but what matters is how you go about it.
Yeah, that's the thing. So I think there's a difference between desire and craving, or whatever.
No, it's still a desire. That's why, again, if somebody is not relinquishing that desire, they won't go beyond the desire. Yes, that desire is what made you keep the precepts, made you read the suttas, but if you are still meditating out of that desire, well, you are bound with the hindrances, as simple as that. So the difference you're presenting, it's not that linear. It's, I want to be free from suffering, which is why I started reading the suttas. Isn't that rooted in desire? Yes, but it's the desire that can eventually make me understand the desire and give up all desire altogether. So, are you giving up desire altogether, or are you trying to justify certain type of desire in the face of another type of desire?
So basically you're saying that so giving up hindrances already means giving up even desire to be enlightened.
Well, because the desire to be enlightened that you know of is the desire of sensuality. If it weren't, you would already be enlightened.
Without acting out of the hindrances. It's like this distinction.
Well, it's same. Like people can't give up the virtue and duty factor.
Yeah.
Oh, but I give that up means I give up enlightenment. Well, so to speak, to some extent. But you don't give it up because you already learned what you need to do correctly. So, you should have desire for jhana and then learn how to go about it correctly. And if you, again, depending on what instructions you read. But if you read the suttas, you realize, oh, it's about overcoming the hindrances. So, first hindrance is desire for pleasure. So am I doing these practices to get the pleasure? Well, I'm hindered by craving for pleasure. Is that for my benefit? Is that for the benefit of others? What am I trying to achieve with it? And so on and so forth. And then you will give up the desire for pleasure. And then you'll get the pleasure of jhana, because you gave it all up. But not before you give it all up. If you think you can have it both ways, that's meditating with hindrances.
So another thing I was thinking about in regard to this similar topic is that it's not necessarily that trivial or obvious to say what constitutes the practice of purifying your mind from hindrances, because somebody might say, oh, I do this, and this, and that works really well for me.
Yeah.
Like I see that I'm kind of...
Well, anything can become a mechanical, mindless method. Yeah, but if you emphasize what needs to be emphasized, which is precepts, guarding of the sense doors, seclusion, watching your intentions, you won't be able to make it mindless and mechanical for too long. In other words, the tendency will be there, but if you don't compromise of these underlying development principles of the gradual training, it will even itself out. But it's when everything else is taken conditionally, and then such views will then be enough. Oh yeah, no, this is what helps me. This is what I can do. Sometimes like this, sometimes like that, and thus, look, I'm free from hindrances. But then if you're honest, you need to look at the entirety of your life and see if that is the case.
And yeah, it's also kind of important to ask yourself, okay, I feel dispassionate, let's say, in regard to things that I used to be passionate about, but why? Like, on what base is that, and is it dependent on me continuing to do something else, for example, that has kind of replaced this pleasure that I used to have in something
and just
else?
check, like, am I liable to worry, to anxiety, to fear, to pain in the future? Like, you might confuse that you're free from it now because there's nothing bothering you, but as I said, just re-invoke something that could bother you and see if you're bothered, and if you're bothered, well, there's your work.
Yeah, and it's not about, again, it's always has to be prioritized, like this state of mind, and instead of like, you can say, oh, I used to be very concerned about this thing, and now I'm not concerned about that anymore.
Yeah.
But it's not. That's
yeah,
not.
And also when the Buddha says purifying your mind from unwholesome things, does not mean preventing these things from arising. It means basically developing imperturbability in regard to them. So not being moved by unwholesome things arising, that's how they will stop arising.
Yeah.
And that's not something you can do mindlessly, because things that move you are on the level of your mind. So that's the only place you can see them. States of mind.
They would stop arising because you've stopped acting in a way that's adding fuel for long enough.
The wild dogs will stop coming because you stop providing food. Stop leaving the food in front of the gate, and they'll stop coming.
Yeah,
They will carry on coming for a while, expecting the food, but if you simply never put the food out again, never fuel the fire
you won't
anymore,
have
it will stop.
And it's funny, like, yeah, if you understand this principle, then you would kind of stop being worried about when will the dogs stop coming, or when there will never be any dogs.
Because that was not the problem.
Yeah.
The problem is that my actions were resulting directly in those dogs being here harassing me. Actions rooted in greed, aversion, distraction, hindrances.